Hawaii's minimum wage is $10.10 per hour, which is more than the minimum pay in more than 30 other states. The cost of living in our island state is the highest in the country, with housing leading the way. State lawmakers are considering several bills that would raise the minimum wage to as much as $15 per hour by 2024. What are the pros and cons? How will that affect our local economy? Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff. In 2007, the state's minimum wage was $7.25 an hour. Incremental increases starting in 2015 got us to where we are now at $10.10, an increase of about 39%. A full-time employee earning minimum wage makes about $21,000 per year before taxes. That's about the same amount as it costs to rent a studio apartment here. Should the minimum wage be increased? Can we afford it? Can we afford not to? Our guests tonight include a public policy analyst, 2 state lawmakers, and the owner of a small business. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. Nicole Wu is the Senior Policy Analyst at Hawaii Appleseed Center for Law and Economic Justice, a nonprofit dedicated to building a more economically and socially just Hawaii. Her areas of focus include wages, inequality, poverty, taxes, and hunger, all of our favorite subjects. Senator Russell Ruderman is a Democrat representing the east side of Hawaii Island. He's also a small business owner and supports a minimum wage increase. Representative Gene Ward is a Republican representing Hawaii Kai and Kalama Valley in East Oahu. He has concerns about, quote, a big jump, unquote, in the minimum wage. And Monica Taguchi-Ryan, President and CEO of Hawaii Highway Inn Restaurants. She too has concerns about raising the minimum wage. Let me start with you, Nicole Wu from the Appleseed Center. How many people are we talking about when we talk about the minimum wage in Hawaii? Are there a lot of workers who live on the minimum wage or close to it?
The last time we looked, we saw about 88,000 people making the minimum wage. It's a bit hard to measure, but that's about where we are. It's about 14% of our state's population.
And are most of those people full-time or part-time or?
Depending on how you measure, they're working more than 35 hours a week, most of them. We know that a lot of them are actually putting together a bunch of part-time jobs, but they are putting in a lot of hours because $10.10 an hour is very little. As you said, to even afford a 1-bedroom apartment, they'd have to be working maybe 2 jobs just to make rent.
Nicole, Monica Taguchi-Ryan from Highway Inn. How does your workforce, how does the minimum wage fit in with what you pay your workers?
We actually pay all our workers above the minimum wage threshold. Our tipped employees, primarily our servers, are really highly compensated. So although they make a minimum wage, there's an additional tip to that, which amounts to about $25 to $30 more an hour. Our back of house also, it's very challenging here in Hawaii. There's a lot of restaurants in the market. Unemployment is very low, and so the market requires us to pay above that threshold for the back of house as well. But I think for the restaurant specifically, there is a challenge with pay disparity between the front of house and the back of house employees.
Well, that's a big issue in the restaurant industry generally, right?
Yes.
Gene Ward, when you hear that businesses are actually, some businesses are forced to pay more than minimum wage just because of the market, does that make you feel like maybe we don't need to have a big increase in the minimum wage because this is going to take care of itself?
Market forces are really adjusting very well. You can see for fast food restaurants, $12, $13 an hour. And we had a small business caucus meeting the other day, and a waiter at Gyota, well, I should maybe mention his name, or the name, well, $72,000 per year for a wait staff. And that was not out of the average. So market forces are out there very active, but
so so you think the average waiter is making $72,000 a year?
In certain sit-down restaurants, yes. That to me was unbelievable.
Well, that's the high end. I've actually looked at the data, and our restaurant servers here actually make lower than the median. They do better than in other states because the amount of the tip credit, the amount that employers can take out of their paycheck is smaller here than in other states, but they're still doing lower than the median. And that's because we've got all these restaurants like, you know, a Zippy's or whatever, where they're not making those kind of tips.
I won't name the name, but the fact that there's a lot of restaurants in Waikiki particularly that are making very good money. And that's not to excuse the issue. But I think before we're jumping right into it, we got to look at this as a historical perspective. We have to look at it from historical in the sense that it started in New Zealand in like 1894. It never came to the U.S. until 1938. The reaction to the minimum wage was in the Industrial Revolution, in its peak, it became where the long hours and the slave wages, they had to do something about it. So as policymakers, they started a minimum wage, and that's how it began.
Senator Russell, you're not just a state senator, you're also a business owner yourself. How does the minimum wage play in your business and the wages in your situation?
Well, just like with Monica's case, we do pay more than the minimum wage as a starting wage, which is sort of necessary just to attract good people these days. But it's also a commitment we made a long time ago. We've always been ahead of the minimum wage. But just to put the other side of the story of someone making $72,000 in a restaurant, I have a friend who's worked at a fast food restaurant for 10 years. Except for the minimum wage increases, she only ever got a 25-cent increase. She's been well reviewed, and as an assistant manager, she's making 25 cents more than minimum wage, and she is an adult with kids. So there's the other side.
That's
of
the back of the house. That you're really
but
right.
I mean,
the back of the kitchen.
Some people like to say it's a training wage, it's an introductory wage. Well, that's fine, but it's not the reality for a lot of people who work really hard full time.
More than a quarter of minimum wage workers in Hawaii are over 40 years old. 60% of them are over 25, and as you said, many of them are parents. A good amount of single parents are working minimum wage, so we have to think about that. Tipped workers are only about 11% of the minimum wage workforce, so if we focus on them, we're kind of missing, 9 out of 10 minimum wage workers.
I mean, given the research that you've done, are most minimum wage workers that you're aware of, are they the chief breadwinners of their families, or do they tend to be more late in life workers or early in life workers, that sort of thing?
Well, it's a real mix. About a fifth of them are parents. As I said, I think it's about 1 out of 6 single parents are minimum wage workers. And yeah, I haven't been able to figure out if they're the primary breadwinner. That's a lot harder to figure out. But we do know that there's a lot of workers who are making just a little bit above the minimum wage, still under $25,000 a year. So there's a whole huge low-wage workforce here that's struggling.
I think the challenge for us is that I think we can all agree that across the country there are huge income disparities that have been going on, and due to a variety of social policies, we have created a situation where people are simply not making it. They are struggling in terms of housing, not just here in the Honolulu market, but all across the country, and the pay disparity in the middle class is shrinking, and I think we can all agree that as a society we need to find ways to address that. For me personally, our servers actually do well. We're fortunate that as a business we do well, and so we're busy. I think there's some restaurants that maybe if they're not as busy as us, definitely they may not be making as much as somebody at Hawai'i. Our servers make about $60,000. $70,000. That's very, very possible.
More than we make, Senator.
Part-time.
But to that, I think
Gotcha.
in the statistics about who makes minimum wage here in Hawaii, Nicole pointed out there was about 14%. We have a huge hospitality industry, and I'm not in social policy, and I don't read the research. What I do is I run a business, and I'm curious to know what percentage of that actually is a tipped position. And it's just the minimum wage issue for me specifically is that it's really quite a blunt instrument. It's a social policy tool that is a blunt instrument. So if we're looking at what kinds of policies that can we create to address the issue of poverty, minimum wage does not adequately address if you are a 17-year-old, for example, living in, or 18 or 19-year-old living in a $100,000 income household, or if you are that 19, 25-year-old single mom with 2 kids. And that's a challenge for me personally as a business owner, is that it's quite a blunt force, not very specific like EITC that Hawaii has.
Let me ask, you mentioned hospitality industry, does your district, doesn't go all the way to Waikiki, does it?
No, it goes from Waikai, Kalama Valley to Aina.
So the caller, this is sort of a gotcha question from a caller. For Representative Ward, how many people in your district make minimum wage? I think reference to your upper economic district.
Everybody who's young and needs to get some training should have an option for a minimum wage. And my fear is if we increase it too high, these young people are going to be cut out of the opportunity to do that. There's not such a thing as a training wage, but if we take the minimum wage where people will cut back hours, or people, and look, they're going to pass on these increases anyway. So in a way, it's kind of a zero sum if it goes, because the cost of living goes up, prices go up, and we kind of just recycle. In the short run, it works, but in the long run, I don't think you really get economic leverage. And what I think Monica is saying is that we got to make a stronger economy. Right now, we've got a very weak economy. Look at the wages that we get out of Waikiki. We haven't diversified to where we have high-paying jobs.
Okay, let me give
and low skills that we've got in our workforce.
I'd love to address that. We live in the richest state in the richest country, and about half of our people are in poverty. And it's wonderful to talk about how we should have a better economy, we should address affordable housing, we should address the other aspects of our society, but these are nebulous things that are not before us on the table today. We have exactly one tool to lift literally hundreds of thousands of Hawaii residents out of poverty. Exactly one. This is it. We can do it. To me, it's unconscionable not to do it. And I'd love to address the point that Representative just said about the prices just go up when we're back where we started. That's absolutely not true. If there is increased cost of goods as a result of the minimum wage increase, it's a small percentage. It's maybe 1%, 2%, 3%, but then you have a very large number of more consumers who are able to afford that price. So you have a world where inflation went up 2% and poverty went down by 50%. I think that's a good trade-off.
Let me go to Nicole Wu because for some more data here.
I think I should respond to his thing first.
No, I'll get to you. We'll be all right.
Okay.
We got an hour. We'll be fine. How can businesses possibly justify paying workers less than what DBDT's own data, $17 an hour for a single person, no kids, says is needed to survive? I'll let everybody take a shot at that, but Nicole Wu, I mean, do we really, of this cohort, how much do people make? If they're making minimum wage, how much are they making in a year? And how much do you need to make? What would a living wage truly be in Hawaii?
That's a great question. And as the preview at the beginning of the show said, if you're working full-time at minimum wage here in Hawaii, that's $21,000 a year. I think everybody knows nobody can live off of that. So we have a lot of minimum wage workers who have to do 2 or 3 jobs. And so there are a bunch of think tanks on the mainland that look at housing, they look at women, they just look at economics in general. They all say that you have to make over $20 an hour to just make your basic needs here in Hawaii. Our own Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism says that right now in Hawaii in 2019, when you're getting health insurance from your employer, you need $17 an hour. That's $34,000 a year. That's pretty reasonable.
Oh, wait, let me break down that statement a little bit. So if you're getting your health care coverage from your employer, which happens if you have more than 20 hours and you're a single person.
Right, a single person with no children here in Hawaii.
Getting health care insurance from their employer.
Yep.
The minimum would be $17 an hour
here in Hawaii
for a living wage.
It's called a self-sufficiency income here in Hawaii. And as you know, Aloha United Way had their study that came out last year showing that 48% of families in Hawaii are not making their basic needs. So there is a problem. If you look at our average wages in Hawaii and you adjust for cost of living, we have the lowest average wages in the nation. We have the highest cost of living. So when we talk about what's out of balance, our wages just are not keeping up with our cost of living.
Let me ask Monica Taguchi-Ryan, as a business owner who has a lot of expenses beyond the wage, like what Senator was saying, if you raise the wage, like let's assume that even though you're paying well above minimum wage, that when the minimum wage goes up 50 cents one year, 50 cents another year, and so on, does that push, would you expect that would push your employees' wages up too, even though they're not on the minimum wage?
So what you're talking about too is wage compression, I believe. And I think, it's important to make the point that every business is different. Their cost structure is different. Some businesses perhaps can. I think the bigger you are, the more economies of scale. I think for me personally, what I'm really passionate about is I'm passionate about protecting small business here in Hawaii. There are some small businesses that simply cannot sustain an increase, and I work side by side with my staff, and I see how hard they work, and definitely I want them to have that livable wage.
Well, let me interrupt you just to say, okay, describe for me the kind of business that might be pushed out of business by an increase of the minimum wage of, say, we're talking about, let's say, $5 over 5 years.
So there have been a couple testimonies so for example, at Hawaiian right now, our labor cost is running at 51%. So I have seen as a response to the minimum wage over the past couple of years, and keep in mind that we've been in a very robust, unprecedented, growing and economy. And so while this is happening, it's being offset by a very robust economy. Now, if the reverse happens and we go into a recession, as some people have been talking about, it's going to paint a very different picture if we go to a $15. And the reality is nobody really knows what's going to happen yet with 15. But my lau has gone from $5.95 in about, I think, 2014, 2015 to $8.65. And that's still at a 40% food cost. Now you add on the 51% labor cost. That leaves me, 9 to 10% to pay for rent, energy costs, insurance, and everything else.
I did get a caller who, I assume this is the owner of this company, but at the Hawaiian Chip Company, we raised the minimum to $10.10, and as a result, prices have gone up, and overall earnings have compressed. I think that's what you're talking about.
Wage compression. Closer
to the minimum to accommodate the increase. We should focus efforts on solving the real problems for both employers and employees, which is cost of land. Gene Ward, I will give you an opportunity to respond to what the Senator was saying, but that's kind of what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah, the cost of doing business, the data is very clear that in 5 years, 80% of the new businesses go out of business. Now, can you say it's directly because it's only the minimum wage? No, there's a number of factors, management issues, et cetera. But when you've got such a high turnover of businesses, you want to increase the minimum wage, it will go up to 15 or 20, but then inevitably what happens, Daryl, is that the big boxes come in or the mom and poppers go out. And as Monica said, if we're going to protect the small businesses, we can't allow, whoever thought Hawaii Kai didn't have minimum wages is having a stereotypical impression, because I'm for the minimum wage, but a reasonable increase, and I'm going to be very clear on that. If you look over the last 10 years, there's been a 30 cents increase every year. This proposal is 3 times that. In other words, we're going historically out of context. Every minimum wage has been reasonable. Now we're going to jump, and I think we're on the socialism Bernie Sanders bandwagon.
Thank God we're on that bandwagon. The wage went up $1.
Okay, we're going to have a good debate tonight.
It didn't go up 30 cents a year.
No,
it went up
still.
$1 per year, and our economy has grown.
Over the last 10 years, it's 30 cents, sir.
No,
I've got the numbers.
It was flat until 2015.
Okay, I said the 10-year average.
Okay,
go ahead.
During the time we've been raising our minimum wage $1 a year, which is the last 5 years, our economy has grown, our employment has boomed, unemployment has gone down. Everybody's doing very well. This idea that if we raise minimum wage, then the rest of the scale has to go up, that's a good thing, because we're talking about the very basics of a minimum wage here. And we talked about 80% of businesses failing, or you talked about having to raise the cost of your lau. That's not attributable to the minimum wage. Those are statistics that are true already. And big box stores coming in, that's happening anyway. And people like to point to automation. Oh, if you raise the minimum wage, people will automate more. That's nonsense. People are automating anyway because it's so much cheaper.
Actually, I like
and
to
it's
disagree
a
with that.
separate issue of whether the people who are working full-time deserve a living.
Okay, let me give Monica a chance to respond.
So I can't quote statistics. I'm not in the business of statistics here, other than what I know in my own business. And quite frankly, the cost of my lau is a direct result of minimum wage increases.
It went from 5 to 9, is that right?
Because what happens in the whole entire supply chain is that it's just like our general excise tax. There's a compounding effect that happens. The other issue that people often tend to forget is that there's a lot of things that our employees and perhaps other people don't recognize is that we have the Prepaid Healthcare Act. We were also required by law to provide things like TDI and workers' comp insurance, which adds like $4 or $5 in addition to whatever the base pay might be. For me as an employer, what I would like to do is I really would like to provide raises to employees that have been with me and say, for example, they've been with me for 3 years, and I would like to give them as much of a raise as possible versus somebody who starts and perhaps quits in about 6 months or a 3 months period of time.
Let me ask Nicole, what is there data out there that says, you know, $1 here, $1 there, $1 next year, how it does ripple out the economy as she's describing? What is the effect of $1, say, or $2 increase in the minimum wage on overall cost of living? Can we say that?
Yeah, so Senator Rutherman actually was just about right. I don't know if you've read the research, but looking at what we're planning for the next several years with these bills, the research shows that prices would go up by about 1% a year. The outlier studies that are really
You mean
high.
on top of whatever inflation is there?
Yeah, attributable to the minimum wage. And then for the really outlier studies, it's about 2% per year. And, you know, getting back to the Lau Lau, I actually saw, was it your op-ed in the Star Advertiser or
My husband.
your husband's? And so I looked on Yelp and I looked at the menus, and from 2014 to 2018 in Waipahu, your Lau Laus went up by $1.30, while the minimum wage went up by $2.85. But the years before, like the 3 years before when the minimum wage was flat, the Lau Laus went up by 70 cents.
And
so
right.
I don't know how it can be the minimum wage's fault.
Yeah,
There's a lot of factors,
Actually,
right?
I can definitely
kind of-
respond to that. One of the issues for business owners is really the elasticity of demand, right? So one thing that the biggest concern for, at least for small businesses and probably in general the business community, is when your cost rises, there's a couple ways that you can address cost rises. You can increase your prices, you can cut costs in different ways, you can try to automate, you can be more efficient. And so, but you're always concerned with how much you can actually raise your price, because if you raise the price too much, then you have a softening of demand. So you're really, then what happens, and the argument goes that if your demand softens, then you can't provide your staff that you've just given a raise to with the hours. And so we've seen some of that happen with some of the studies.
Let me ask Nicole Wu, but if you raise the minimum wage, someone's got to pay for it. So who ultimately ends up paying for the increased wages of these workers?
Well, the studies show that when you raise the minimum wage, prices do go up a little bit, but the workers benefit, and the workers are also the customers. When you talk about demand, you need customers who can afford to buy your food. And right now we have minimum wage workers who not only can't afford to buy the food, but they don't have the time to go to a restaurant or anything like that. So when we see, workers' hours maybe getting cut by 25%, if they're making 50% more in minimum wage after, 5 years, then they're doing better and they're able to spend more time with their families. And we also find that when workers are paid more, they do become those better workers. You don't have as many turnover costs, you don't have training costs.
At this point, Monica Taguchi-Ryan from Hawai'i, your restaurant in Waipahu is in a very blue-collar area. And
I'm very price sensitive.
Very price sensitive, but also, do you think that it's possible that because the wages around in Waipahu are probably getting better for either market reasons or the minimum wage going up, that you've actually maybe getting better business? That's the argument they're making, is that the workers will then turn around and buy more stuff.
That's definitely an argument that if people are making more, they're going to spend more. The reality, however, is people in Hawaii are just struggling. And even they may have more they may have more income. The reality for that demographic is they're just trying to even just meet their basic needs.
Right.
For
Well, the research
rent and-
shows that low-income workers, when they make more money, they plow it right back into the economy. When wealthy people make more money, they,
But that-
put it in their stock
That's also
portfolio.
the assumption that small business owners are wealthy people.
Oh, I
And-
didn't
yeah,
mean I didn't
right.
mean you. I just mean if you're giving
Understood.
a raise or a tax cut to rich
But
people,
that is an assumption
Understood.
at
they're
the
not going to
legislature.
spend it.
That's true.
And I think that this is the
assume if
reason
you're in
why
business, you're rich.
this is the reason why
False assumption.
that I'm here is there's so many small business people that really work 15, 18 hours, started their business out of a car, are struggling. And for me, small business here in our communities or across the country, they are so important, not just from an employment standpoint in terms of how many people they employ across the country. Collectively, I believe and I don't know what the statistics is, but collectively, I believe we employ more people than big business. But also, when you have a lot of small businesses versus big box retailers, the senator had mentioned, is that there's much more income distribution. We talk about the 1%, the 99%, and I think that's what we're arguing for is for the people with the have-nots. But small business is so important here in Hawaii. And my concern, and I think a lot of people that do have small businesses, is what the negative impact and consequences of a high minimum wage.
Let me ask you, Gene, this is a couple of callers have wanted me to give questions directly to you. And for Gene Ward, when is trickle-down economics going to reach minimum wage folks? That's a tough question, but I'm just wondering now, what is the solution then to reducing the income disparity? You talk about
an economic engine. We got to have a better economy.
But right now, the economy is fired up as it's ever been.
We got a place on the Big Island. We can have a moon. We could be training all the astronauts in a moon base area.
The question was about the minimum wage people.
The point is we got to get an economy that is expanding and is more diversified, where people can get jobs that pay income other than minimum wage.
Well, the two-thirds
So we all agree we would like a better economy.
But my point
with
is, we at the
higher wages
legislature
all around.
don't pay attention to that, Senator, and you know that.
Well,
we
two-thirds-
don't do economic development.
Two-thirds of the economy
agree.
here in Hawaii and across the country, two-thirds is consumer spending. And our economy has been growing a little bit slower than the rest of the country. We have the lowest average wage in the country when you control for costs. So
It's a reflection of the economy.
Well, we're also
and wages are
we're
the
also
main
an
driver of
economy.
consumer
Okay.
spending. If
Let me
you want to
get-
grow the economy, people need to be able to buy things.
Wait. Okay, Senator.
Thank you. A couple of important points have come up that I'd love to briefly address. One is that it was mentioned earlier, all of our business, I'm a small business person too. Well, I started a small business. Some people would call it a medium-sized business now.
I think Hawaiian's kind of a medium-sized
Okay,
business,
good.
actually. That's fair.
All of our costs go up every year. Electricity, rent, taxes, shipping, everything, and that affects the price of our goods. So that's a given. That's the society we live in. So the question to ask is, what about the workers? Are we just going to raise prices and that works for everybody except the people working? Because they need to come along with us as all of our other prices go up. And the last thing, by the way, I operate a business in the poorest district on the island. I'm very price sensitive. I know plenty about being price sensitive. But we talked about where would the burden fall if we raise minimum wage. The burden will fall more where it ought to fall, on the private sector employer, where right now the burden falls on our taxpayers through our employees being on food stamps, being on rent subsidies. I think that a lot of business people like to talk about personal responsibility, paying our way as we go. Well, I think that ethic has to be applied to the business itself. I don't think you can call your business a success if the people that work for you are in poverty.
An interesting point, I don't know if you've studied this, but I've worked for employers whose full-time employees are on Medicaid because the Medicaid wage thresholds are surprisingly high. People might be surprised at how much you can make and be on Medicaid. Especially if you've got a single mom with 2 kids, she could make $50,000 and be on Medicaid. Do we have a sense of how many of the low-wage workers who have full-time jobs are also on government assistance of some kind?
I haven't figured that one out yet.
What would you guess?
90.
Like 90%?
Yes.
You think that 90% of the people who
You
are-
don't think someone's on minimum wage is getting food stamps at least?
Yeah,
I don't
SNAP
know
is
anybody
much
who's
easier to
not.
get. Yeah.
I don't know anyone at minimum wage who's not getting food stamps.
So in a way, do you think, Representative Ward, that if you raise the minimum wage, you might save the government some money?
No, I agree. I haven't disagreed with anything that the senator said. It's probably only a degree of how much you want to do the minimum wage. You want to go $15, $20, $25. It's relative to the survival of the private sector. And we are an economy that's market-based, and we have to face all the variables, of which one that he jumped over, I want to jump back to that. He said, AI, don't worry about it. AI, artificial intelligence, is here, it's real. 5G and all the things that we can automate are coming very slowly to the kitchens of McDonald's in some places on the mainland. You order now on a pad as you go into a restaurant. Service now in various places is going to get more automated. Japan has got service through a vending machine, basically, that used to be a restaurant. It's very real. AI is very real, and it's one thing that I think we kind of ignore. And not that you're an AI denier, but when you say AI is not going to be a variable, the more the wages go up.
I didn't say anything of the sort. What I said was that's happening anyway, and it's not the, it's not the cause of or higher wages aren't the cause of more automation, and it's not the result of more automation.
I disagree
And
with
the
you.
workers need to be taken care of anyway because they're human beings.
Good
Well,
job,
of all
guys.
the states
Okay.
in the nation, we could probably handle automation better than others. We have the lowest unemployment rate in the nation. Employers keep talking about how they can't find good workers. We actually have more jobs and not enough well-qualified workers. And we have an aging workforce. We're going to need more people to take care of people. So we're going to need more workers.
Monica, as a representative of a restaurant, how realistic is the concern that, I mean, what would happen, do you think, in your restaurant and some others, minimum wage goes up and you have to cut costs? Are there opportunities to automate restaurant jobs, and would you consider those if your employment level got to your cost?
Absolutely. I think as a business owner, sustainability for the business owners is to be profitable. You have to make money in order to keep your doors open and have your employees be able to, compensate your employees. And any opportunity to provide more efficiencies through technology is always going to be a welcome thing for businesses. In our company, what has happened as a result of our high labor costs and also minimum wage, because we're not just talking about the past several years of minimum wage increases, but we're also talking about the wage compression of having to move everybody above the minimum wage higher.
Let alone healthcare costs.
Yeah. And one thing that Senator said is, the failure of social policy, I think that's just really a struggle for me, is that the burden is being placed on businesses. Now, government does not discriminate between an ExxonMobil and a Highway Inn. We are being treated in very similar ways. And my challenge is impact upon small businesses, that there are going to be some people that are simply not going to be able to survive the impact of minimum wage. And when that takes out jobs, I don't think that we're really doing a service to our community. And the other issue is that's the reason why we should have a better tax code system. The whole idea of a tax code system in EITC is really is a very precise social policy, and also
So to translate what you're saying is use the tax code to reduce the cost of living for the low-wage people.
An efficient tax code is basically taking resources from the wealthy and redistributing it to people that need it the most. And what we have seen in this country is that we do not have an efficient tax code, that the resources are not properly being distributed, and we have enormous social problems as a result.
Okay, I've got a lot of questions. I'm getting kind of backed up, so I have to get through some of these questions. What effect does minimum wage have on nonprofits? I thought that's an interesting question. I mean, in the nonprofit sector, have you ever looked at that? I mean, there's nonprofits who people do basic services, health and human service type workers. Is the minimum wage an issue in that sector?
It is, and I've actually worked for nonprofits for most of my career, and I've kept the books for them and had to manage them and deal with juggling the bills, kind of like at a small business, and it's the same problems. I do have to say that some of the nonprofits have said that their contracts are with the government, And so it's going to be hard for them to raise the wage. But we're not talking about raising the wage tomorrow. We're talking about steps, increments over 5 years, predictable for businesses and predictable for the nonprofits. So I would certainly support any kind of bills to increase the government funding for some of these social services to make sure that they can afford an increase in the minimum wage.
You know, speaking of specific bills, there's a Senate bill and there's a House bill that have now crossed over. Does the Senate bill the one that has the tax credit for small business?
Yes, for small
how does that
business. And
work?
thank you. I wanted to bring up the subject that Monica said. Yes, we can't treat Exxon the same as Highway. And we're not. And no one is saying that we will. And if I had my way, we would have a discounted wage for small businesses, also for training, also for under 18. I wish we had that. But all the discussions include a lower minimum wage for the smallest of businesses, whether that's going to be less than 10 or less than 50, we don't know yet. Right now, there's a discussion of a partial business tax credit for small businesses. It would be 20%, I think, of the increase. I don't necessarily agree with that idea, but I'm not opposed to it. I will support any idea that allows us to give our workers a significant wage raise and be able to afford their life here in Hawaii.
But just to simplify, the idea of a tax credit is what's in that bill. Would that help?
Any tax credit for a small business helps. I mean, I think, you know, ExxonMobil gives enormous tax breaks, and small businesses don't. So.
Okay.
A basic question, though.
I got stuck on the tax.
Senator, you don't need the government to tell you to pay your employees more money. I mean, you're saying like, oh, my poor employees, they need this government to come and say, pay them more minimum wage. Why don't you just pay them more minimum
Thank
wage?
you. That's a wonderful question. I love when somebody asks me that. Because if I pay my employees a higher wage, first of all, I do, and I will continue to do so, and they will do better. But the rest of our society is still in poverty.
Oh, so you're not talking.
And wait, no, hold it. And wait,
Okay.
if I only raise mine, it's not a level playing field anymore, is it? If we all do that, I didn't lose any competitive disadvantages to all the other businesses.
And right now we have market forces where your business is stealing money from, stealing employees from others because they're competing for basically
Hey,
unskilled
Representative Ward, I'm
people.
trying to keep this on the bills that we have in front of us, and so
We're not
and
talking about the
you
minimum
guys can enjoy engaging each other more after we're done with the show because there's a parking lot you could go out there. But, just kidding, but because I want to get on point on some of these bills. We've literally gone through almost 40 minutes of this show. That's how
We
fast
didn't
it's
talk
going.
about the bills. Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about what's on the table. So the House bill, as I understand, has a special discount on the minimum wage to employers who provide health insurance to their employees.
Yes.
Why is that a worthwhile benefit? Why would that be necessary? Aren't these businesses already paying health care for their employees?
If it's over 21 hours, by law, they must do that. So for those who are full-time employees, it would not be relevant. For those who are part-time employees, definitely it would be a figure. The point is, I think, as the Senator is trying to say, maybe we should exempt small employees. Maybe we should give a tip discount for, instead of $72,000, a tip credit as it is. Other ways, if you're younger, you can get lower wages. There's right now a disability minimum wage, which I think is being possibly repealed. So there's a number of ways of not one size fits all. That's my point, Darryl.
It's really funny, and Monica made that point earlier. This is a blunt element.
Yes.
But at the same time, when you talk about 5 different wage categories that you're trying to manage in your restaurant, how does that work for a small business person? Like, okay, how old are you? Oh, now you're 19. Now I got to raise your wage.
I just really want to give credit to all the small business people out there because we know this, we see this in the news year after year that Hawaii is one of the most hostile places to do business. And if you are making it in Hawaii and you are successful and you're able to run a small business or struggling to get there, kudos to you because this environment is really tough with the high regulation and the high taxes. Small business here in Hawaii is no different than the struggle people have every day living their lives. We have high real estate, high cost of goods, high energy costs.
The rail.
the rail, you know,
We're
and
getting
now,
off script.
and
Well,
now,
that's-
and now
that's
possibly
affecting
high
her,
labor.
yeah.
But I do want to get back to the issue of tip credit. One of the things that I really would like to see in the bills crossed over is this idea of tip credit. And basically what that is it's like a dual wage. And so people, especially here in Hawaii, where hospitality is huge, people that are normally tipped, that we can then transfer what we would have paid them, you know, whether that's $3, $5, 50%, and transfer that over to the back
So,
kitchen.
okay, let me get this. So like you've got a server out there who's, if they're only making $13 an hour and they're making $5 an hour in tips, you'd rather have that $2 an hour that would get them to 15 transferred over to the back
Correct.
of the house guy who's cooking and not getting any tips.
Every full-service restaurant will tell you that the wage disparity between what servers make and what the back of house makes is huge. And what I see when we talk about, you know, demographics, minorities, talk about older people, people with children, it's very difficult for them. They tend to be the kitchen workers. For example, in Kaka'aka, most of my servers are going to college. You know, working at Hawai'i may just be a temporary thing. The people in the back, they're here to stay. And I really would like to have the opportunity to pay my back staff more wages through the tip credit.
Nicole,
We already have a tip credit here in Hawaii.
It's
Well, let
not
me-
significant
Yeah.
enough, though.
but let me
is the
ask
problem.
though, when you start talking about all these multiple wage levels and minimum wages for different categories of workers, we had a question about nonprofits. You know, is that a manageable system, to have a system where you've got so many different categories of wage earners, people who are making health insurance, people who are not, people who are, I mean, is that, doesn't it get too complicated for the business operators and even the government to manage when you've got all those bells and whistles and widgets and stuff they've got to manage?
I think the business owners can answer that for you. But with the health insurance question, part of the reason that credit for businesses to pay a slightly lower wage, why that went into a bill is because we've heard over and over again from folks that they're kept at 19 hours a week. Their bosses tell them not to come in for any more hours. So they're stringing together 2 or 3 part-time jobs. They're working more hours than I am probably, and they're still not getting health insurance. And health insurance is a real cost to employers, and we hear that. And so this is a way I think that some legislators are trying to recognize the cost of business, but also make sure that people are getting their health insurance.
So do you think that's fair? Do you think that would help address that issue, to have a minimum wage different for people who are getting health insurance from the ones that are not?
I think there's a real financial benefit to getting health insurance, but we need to make sure that the lower wage is at a livable wage. And you know, right now the bills as they are showing a very small increase for people who are getting health insurance, and it's just not enough for them. And then the thing with the small businesses, I work for a small nonprofit, and I don't think, you know, not that I make minimum wage, but let's say I did work for a mom and pop shop and I made a lower minimum wage. It's not like I could go to my landlord and say, hey, I'm making the lower minimum wage, can you give me a discount on my rent? So that's my fear, is that if we have these tiers, it's not like you can go out and say I got a discount, you know, at Safeway or something. You still have to pay the same cost of living.
I'm surprised how many calls we're getting, so let me get through some of these. Caller worked at minimum wage and made $12,000 last year. He quit and is now living on Quest and is homeless, but is better off. He has insurance and a debit card. That's someone from Waimanalo.
A comment or a question or?
So this is the comment. This is what we're provoking out of viewers, which is really good. There's an international consensus that income is a determinant of health. Given Hawaii's cost of living, aren't proposed increases far too low? Russ, Senator Ruderman?
Well, yes, they are, but you know, it's got to do with what's politically possible. You know, I agree. $17 has been kicked around as really the minimum living wage, and 23 by some calculations. But there are other places that have established a $15 an hour, like New York, San Francisco, Seattle. So I think it's doable. And you brought up a couple of really good points about if it's simple, isn't that much better? But the idea of the different tiers and the exemptions for small businesses and insurance, it's got to do with what's politically possible to make it happen. It would be ideal if it was just simpler. And this brings me to the one subject is sometimes we see people opposed to the minimum wage say no, 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 no. But really what I think we're hearing from everyone here is perhaps it's something that should be considered, but let's talk about the details. It's not one size fits all. And I encourage those who have opposed this increase to get involved in the discussion and help craft a significant minimum wage increase that works for everybody. Instead of saying no.
I absolutely agree that the devil is in the details. But again, I'm going to go back to the idea that this is a blunt instrument. This is an what we're really concerned about is something policy that addresses poverty issues, and everybody agrees upon that. But it is not a precise tool, and so. And the effects of that is if we put out some small businesses, that doesn't put us in any better position. Because if you think about it, when the economy was doing well and you had 10 applications, right, employers are going to try to pick the person with the best skill set or the person they believe will show up to work every day and be on time. Now, so because we're in a robust economy, the unemployment is low, we've now, a lot of employers are now hiring some people that are unemployable. They have a difficult time getting to work, or they don't show up for a variety. There may be a variety of reasons for that, obviously. But when the economy doesn't do well, what's going to happen to all those people that we're talking about? They're going to be left unemployed.
Is that a realistic concern that that while the economy is good, it might be easier to raise the minimum wage, but then when the economy goes bad, then it gets really hard. It gets a lot more. There's incentive to get rid of those people.
Mm-hmm. Recessions are a vicious cycle, right? You start losing jobs, and then businesses start losing customers, and it just cycles and cycles down. But the economy is 2/3 consumer spending, so having a robust minimum wage holding up the bottom during a recession is actually a way to protect ourselves from a real crash, because otherwise people are really not going to have any money to spend during that recession. And if they lose some hours, if they lose one of their 3 part-time jobs, well, at least they have enough money per hour to be able to buy the basics.
So some of these questions that are now coming in are above my pay grade, at least. Whole Foods will be lowering employees' hours to handle $15 an hour. I hadn't heard that before.
I'm not sure how that person would know that.
That actually has been in the news.
It has been in the news, that's what they
Amazon.
said? Amazon too?
Amazon Whole Foods, Amazon.
And then why not, but then the caller brings up the other twist is why not rent control? They rise faster than wages. I mean, gentlemen, I mean,
highest cost of living is driven by the high prices of
so if
housing.
government had been more successful in helping provide housing, education, would we be having such a vigorous debate right now?
We probably wouldn't. And that's what I go back to is that, this is a failure of our education system. This is a failure of social policy. This is a failure of government, allowing things to get too far. It's just like the situation with our homeless population. Back in about 5-6 years ago when I was testifying in front of ACDA for the Castle and Cook property, I was already talking about a housing crisis, but we were already well into it. Now 6 years later, it's just gotten worse.
So I think it's fine to talk about the housing crisis and the things the government failed to do, but that's all the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, the vague things that are not before us on the table. Yes, is it a blunt instrument? Yeah, it's like a hammer. And poverty is exponentially growing in our state. And I'd like to talk about a couple of the effects of poverty that are actually harming business. I don't think it's good for business that when visitors come to your business or to our state, people are sleeping in the doorways. I don't think that's good for business. And when you have someone who's not making ends meet at your business, they are almost by definition always looking for another job. So doesn't loyalty and stability, and doesn't that count for part of your business? In other words, when we talk about minimum wage, it's not just one side of the ledger. There's another side of the ledger. If you're constantly losing people because they need another job, you're constantly having turnover and training costs and inefficiencies that come from that. That's a very serious business cost. And I keep coming back to this. When we talk about housing and economy and what government has failed is, we have exactly one tool to lift a massive portion of our people out of poverty. And when
the
we
EITC.
I don't know anyone who's been lifted out of poverty. It's a wonderful tool.
There's
Earned income tax
earned
credit.
income tax credit,
Well,
but
we
also
need
great.
both. I mean, I worked very hard to pass the EITC, and that's one
I
part
think
of it, and
that was a
that's
great-
government taking.
that was a great policy because it was
Right.
very, very, very precise.
But we need both.
But we're in this together, and if you create a situation where businesses will either decrease employees' hours or have to go out of business already because it is difficult for us, then the government will suffer lower GET receipts as well. So now you have an unemployment increase, you have lower GET receipts. Who does that really
But
benefit?
none of that has actually happened. As we've raised our wages, we haven't seen unemployment gone up. We've seen the
But
opposite.
we also haven't seen the consequence of a $15 minimum wage increase.
And when we look at a place that has done that, like Seattle or New York or San Francisco, we see a robust growing economy. And in fact, what's driving this increase in wage is a very wealthy, strong economy. And that's what we share
With
with
the possibility
places.
of a recession in the
Yeah,
next
so-
year.
Oh, well, God, let's not do anything then.
No, I'm
because,
just
you know,
saying,
something might happen.
Pay
right?
attention
this
to
is
all the variables.
this is
Half the
economic.
economists say there is
Okay,
one,
all
half
right,
the
so-
economists
Do
say
we
there's not
ignore
one.
the growing poverty problem or
No,
not?
I'm saying
That's
this
my
is
question.
another
I think
variable.
there
It's
are
another variable,
there are
that's
options
all.
on the table, like
Higher
you said.
minimum wage.
I don't see any.
Okay, all right, everybody's talking at the same time. Stop. Okay, so let's when we do this, I default to the cards.
Thank you. That's our punishment.
No, this is a
Order
good
here,
thing. The
order
minimum
here.
wage is in the 1960s was $1.50. I think when I think I worked for that.
I
$3.
did
At some point.
$2.50.
The economy has increased tenfold since then, and the minimum wage should have also raised 10 times. Unless we do this, we will have more of the rich-poor disparity. Why isn't any of the minimum wage proposals say, let's peg it here and just, and then put an index and increase it on a regular basis? Is that a viable thing? Has that been suggested?
Yeah, there are a bunch of states that already do that, and it was in the bills at the beginning of session, putting in an automatic cost of living increase like we have in things like Social Security. But that was deleted almost immediately, so I would let the legislators
what's wrong
explain
with-
why that
what's
was
wrong with
taken
that?
out.
Joe, the reality is we have a market economy, supply and demand, and as people need employees, they're going to pay them. They're going to pay them huge wages.
But if you index the minimum wage, this is a specific question, to some sort of a cost of living, then you're not pushing the cost of living
But-
up with the minimum wage. You're following the cost of living, right?
Exactly. But then you have to do the market economies of what otherwise Whole Foods is going to cut back with either hours or employees. And then are we ready to suffer that consequence
Okay,
by
let me ask
paying
Senator
more
Rudman, though.
unemployment?
The
Let me
question
ask-
is
okay.
if the workers are doing better after they've had their hours reduced. Here in Hawaii, we have workers who are working too many hours for too low wages.
I don't think
And the
anybody
research
believes that
shows-
80% fail in the first 5 years. It's not a cakewalk to be a business person.
No, it's not. But
It's not.
Okay.
But if a worker's
I
making
find that
more,
irrelevant to say that because we still have this poverty problem that we either fix or we don't.
But Senator Rubin, what I wanted to ask you specifically
Okay, that's
was,
enough.
again, about the strategies and tactics of a minimum wage. The idea of having it pegged to a cost of living index. Why is it that I mean,
I'm all
that seems
for it.
awfully simple. But
It seems simple, and if we had done that 50 years ago, we wouldn't need to talk about raising our minimum wage now. That would be a reasonable way to address this problem. It's our failure to have wages keep up with the cost of living that has caused our poverty crisis and the reason we have to have this
But
discussion.
let me give Monica a chance. As a business person, if you peg the minimum wage to that, do you think that would be more tolerable?
You know, it's risky. I think it's risky when you peg something to an abstract number because for businesses, everybody has a different cost structure. I cannot dictate, senators here, you must be doing very well. But there are some businesses that are not doing very well. And so if it's tied to CPI, for example, and their cost is not adjusting to what is going out in the greater economy, it's going to be very tough for them. The other issue is, just want to point out, is that a lot of, the restaurant industry has about, I have to look at my notes here, it's about 100,000 people here in the state. And a lot of industries that have very low profit margins typically are the ones that hire minimum wage type employees because the profit margins are very small.
Let me throw out one more. Caller is for raising the minimum wage since we are being overtaxed. GE tax, gas tax, et cetera, should cut taxes. We are taxing the poor in this state more than most places. Isn't that correct?
We
I
have
do
the
agree with
second heaviest burden of taxes on poor people in the whole country. And that has to do with our GET because it taxes everything and it taxes it multiple times when it goes through the wholesale to the retail. And that's a huge burden on our low-income families here.
The marginal rates are 11%, just under New York,
And,
California.
these are things that I think the legislature can consider in terms of giving a certain income level back their GET. I mean, that's another policy tool that I don't
Well,
know
we
that
already
We,
do that.
yeah, we have a
We
tax
do
credit
that.
that does that.
These are tiny little we should and maybe we can. The person who's not making ends meet can't deal with maybe one day we'll fix
But Senator,
these other
it's not a silver bullet.
No.
Poverty
It
is a multifaceted educational training, upbringing, family, child rearing
But it's
practices.
also related to
You
how
make
much
it like
money
if
you
we
make.
did minimum wage, all the
the
poverty
problems
would go away.
would be solved.
Well,
I'm not saying that.
No, about 80%.
I mean, about poverty. Poverty is a multi-phenomenal.
I'm okay
We've spent
addressing
trillions
80%
and
of our
trillions of
poverty.
dollars in
I think our
America.
audio person is about to quit her
I
job.
don't quite much. I'm sorry.
I want to be a waiter and get $72,000 a month.
Okay, well, anyway, this has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. It's a very important and serious question. I hope everybody feels like they got in their story. And I'd also like to thank all of you for joining us tonight. And we thank our guests, Nicole Wu, Senior Policy Analyst at the Hawaii Appleseed Center for Law and Economic Justice, Representative Gene Ward, the Minority Leader in the State House, Senator Russell Ruderman, Democrat from the east side of Hawaii Island, and Monica Toguchi Ryan, President and CEO of Highway Inn Restaurants. Next week on Insights, we'll hear from the two candidates running for the special election for Honolulu Council District 4. That's Hawaii Kai to Waikiki. Trevor Ozawa and Tommy Waters will be here to answer our questions and yours. Join us. I'm Daryl Huff for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Ahui ho.